administration. And Mr. Clinton is still waffling, right? The American Physics Society, made up of physicists, many of whom are consultants to the Pentagon, have basically said, this system is so easily decoyed, don't even bother with it. Never mind that we never had this defense system against the bristling Soviet missiles or the red commie Chinese missiles. We now have to spend tens of billions of dollars against, let's see who, the North Koreans? Who can barely feed their people, who are now holding out an olive branch with South Korea, and who basically must be wondering, how could they have scared the most powerful military machine in the world with missiles that they don't even have yet? And you know what the answer is? Our defense policy is not driven by legitimate defense needs. It's driven by the giant defense corporations who want more and more government contracts to build more and more weapons. Let me tell you one thing. We've got to start focusing on solutions and corrections of abuses in this country. You do not, in a democracy, allow corporations to build prisons and demand more customers from nonviolent offenders under the ridiculous war on drugs. Combination of medieval traits and big business. It's 16 to 17 billion dollars direct and tens of billion dollars indirect in terms of police resources. We are exposing tens of thousands of people to mayhem in the streets because of this drug war, which keeps the price of drugs sky high, of course. We are implementing it in a very racist way, where a teenager a black teenager has 5 times the prospect of ending up in jail than a white teenager. We have a half a million nonviolent offenders out of the 2 million people in jail in this country, higher than communist China. We have a half a million nonviolent drug offenders, which is more than all the prisoners in all the prisons in Western Europe with a population of 310 million, bigger than the US. It's madness. It's generating disrespect for the law. It's not rehabilitating addicts. Do we send alcoholics to jail? Do we treat alcoholics as criminals? Why do we treat drug addicts as criminals? Will we in this richest country in the world, ever again allow the oligarchy, the plutocracy, the corporate government taking over our political government to say to us that we cannot abolish child poverty, that we cannot abolish poverty, that we cannot provide affordable housing, that we cannot have universal health insurance, that we cannot have respect for the use of taxpayer dollars instead of diverting them into corporate welfare, that we cannot have a peace dividend, that we cannot have an opportunity for small businesses to break their chains from the commanding corporations that control them through franchise agreements, that we cannot have unions for tens of millions of Americans to have a decent standard of living, that we cannot clean our environment and transform our country into a solar-powered society? No, we're never going to let them do that. Listen for a moment to George W. Bush. Pardon?
What about Colombia?
The same. What do you think I'm going to say about Colombia? Haven't I? spend $1.7 billion on rehabilitation in this country, not on fighting insurgency under the guise of chemical warfare against the environment and the people of Colombia. A bit of comic relief on George W. Bush. Never say George W. Bush is not a pioneer. It's true he's had 4 failing businesses. He made $14 million out of a corporate subsidy scheme for the Texas Rangers baseball stadium when he sold a $600,000 stake into a $14 million take after he and his corporate lobbyists made the taxpayers in Arlington, Texas build this stadium and inflate the wealth of the team. But he is a pioneer. He's the first presidential candidate to run for the presidency of the United States as a giant corporation disguised as a human being. We've now seen the Democratic Party surrender the control of the Congress to the likes of Newt Gingrich, Tom DeLay, Dick Armey, Trent Lott, craven right-wing segments of the Republican Party. I've rarely seen any more craven, cruel people than those guys. Anyway, we can't even rely on the Democratic Party to rescue our national legislature from the extreme wing of the opponent party. What good are they if they can't do that? Number one. Now Al Gore is having trouble with George W. Bush, who has named himself a compassionate conservative. You know, if I ever get on these presidential debates, I say, Governor Bush, you say you're a compassionate conservative, but there's the highest child hunger in the entire world, entire country is in Texas. You say you're a compassionate conservative, but you blocked an effort with federal funding to help children have health insurance in Texas. You say you're a compassionate conservative, but you're filling the lungs of Texans with pollution because you let the polluters off the hook in return for campaign contributions. You say you're a compassionate conservative, but you're blocking entry into the courts by wrongfully injured people against the perpetrators of their harm who damage and injure and make them sick. Governor Bush, what would you be like if you weren't a compassionate conservative? By the way, since he calls himself a compassionate conservative, I wonder where does that leave a conservative? Just a simple old run-of-the-mill conservative. He's indicting conservatives by requiring the adjective to be placed in front of the word conservative. Last week at the Democratic National Convention, Al Gore tried a bold move. He nominates Joe Lieberman for vice president, the corporate Democrat par excellence, a man who's obsessed in the Senate in immunizing corporations from responsibility for serious harm done to innocent people. Every time he gets a chance to vote, immunize the biomaterials, immunize the pharmaceutical, immunize the HMOs. It's called tort reform. We call it tort deform. At any rate, this is a rather interesting stance for someone who believes in personal morality. What about corporate immorality? He sees himself as the conscience of the Senate. Conscience of the Senate? First of all, can the Senate have a conscience, given what it's sold out to begin with? But anyway, that was gesture to the right wing of the Democratic Party that, don't worry folks, Joe